I arrived at 7 in the morning on that Friday in November with the chocolate cake that I spent the whole morning making, the one that my niece Clara has always loved since she was little, when she was 5 years old and I was teaching her to lick the bowl of raw dough in the kitchen of the house where she grew up, the same house that I helped pay for 15 years straight without ever asking for a penny back. I rang the doorbell and waited with the tray in my hands, feeling the weight of my 67 years on my back that had been hurting since I woke up at 3 in the morning to start the recipe because I wanted it to be perfect for her birthday, 28 years old that day. The door opened and Clara was standing there with an expression I had never seen on her face before, a mixture of disgust and cruel amusement, her eyes shining with something that chilled my spine even before she opened her mouth. "Old parasite," she said loudly, and snatched the tray from my hands with such force that I almost lost my balance right there on the doorstep. I stood paralyzed, my brain trying to process those 2 words that came out of the mouth of a girl I raised as a daughter when my sister died 23 years ago, who I fed, clothed, took to school for 10 whole years, who slept in my bed when she had nightmares, who I taught to read and write, who I called godmother with so much affection. Old parasite. The words echoed in my head as I looked into the room and saw the whole family gathered there. My brother Marcos, 59 years old, sitting on the sofa with his arms crossed. My sister-in-law, Patricia, 56 years old, next to him with the same icy look. My nephew Raphael, 32 years old, leaning against the wall with a smile on the side of his mouth that made my stomach turn. And 6 or 7 other people I had known forever, cousins, relatives, all standing like statues looking at me with that expression, from someone who was waiting for exactly that to happen. And then I saw it. Everyone started to applaud slowly, slow and silent claps that didn't make any noise, but that pierced my ears like screams, claps of approval for the humiliation they had just done to me, claps of celebration for Clara's cruelty, and I felt my legs weaken. I felt my heart race so fast that I thought I was going to have a heart attack right there. I felt cold sweat running down my back and my vision getting blurry at the edges. I tried to speak. I opened my mouth, but no sound came out, just a strangled throat noise that I didn't even recognize. I took a staggering step back, and that was when I noticed that the wall in the hallway, that entrance wall where the family photograph had always been taken at Christmas 2019, had a lighter rectangle where my photo was. The wallpaper around it was faded by the sun, but that protected piece was darker, proving that there was a frame there until very recently, proving that someone had taken my image from that wall on purpose, literally erasing me from that family's history. My gaze went down and stopped at the dark wooden sideboard that was right there at the entrance, and on top of it was a small cardboard box, the size of a shoebox, with my name written in large black marker letters, Elena. My hands were shaking so much that I could barely hold myself upright, but some part of my still-functioning brain made me take 2 steps forward and pick up that box. And when I opened the lid, right there in front of all of them who were still staring at me in absolute silence, I saw inside it all the things I had given as gifts over the years. The silver necklace I gave Clara when she graduated from high school 10 years ago. The gold earrings I gave Patricia on her wedding anniversary 8 years ago. The wallet leather bag that I gave to Marcos for his 50th birthday. Old photographs where I appeared with them were torn in half, leaving only their parts. And at the bottom of the box, there was a folded paper. I took the paper with my hands shaking so much that I almost tore it. I opened it and read the words, handwritten by Clara. I recognized her handwriting immediately. Aunt Elena, you are no longer welcome in this house or in this family's life. You are a weight we have carried out of pity for too long. We no longer want your cakes, your cheap gifts, your boring stories, your suffocating presence. You are old, alone, and have nothing left to offer. Leave this here and go away. Don't come back. No one will miss you. The words danced in front of me. I read and reread, trying to understand how it was real, how that girl I loved more than anything in my life had written those words, how my brother and all those people were standing there letting it happen, approving with silence and applause. I felt nausea rising, bile burning my throat, and I had to swallow several times to keep from vomiting right then and there. My legs gave way, and I leaned against the wall, the rough texture of the wallpaper scratching my hand. I looked back into the room and saw that no one had moved. No one came to help me. No one showed an ounce of compassion or regret on their faces. There were just hard faces waiting for me to leave, waiting for me to accept that and disappear from their lives. Before continuing, if you have already experienced family betrayal, leave a like and subscribe to the channel, because this story goes far and revenge will be proportional to the pain. Comment which city you're watching from because I need to know I'm not alone in this. I stood there for another 10 seconds that felt like 10 hours, holding that damn box against my chest, feeling the weight of the cake I made with so much love being carried inside like it was trash. And then I forced my legs to move, turned my back, and left that house, the door slamming behind me with a final sound that echoed through the empty street. I went down the 4 steps to the entrance and almost fell on the last one. I managed to hold on to the cold iron railing that burned my hand in the morning cold, and I stood there on the sidewalk, not knowing where to go, not knowing what to do. My car was parked 20 meters away, but it seemed to be 20 kilometers away. I didn't have the strength to walk there. 2 neighbors that I knew by sight, Dona Carmen, 70 years old, and Dona Beatriz, 65, were on the sidewalk on the other side watering plants, and had seen everything. I felt their eyes on me, and the shame that invaded me was so strong that I wanted to disappear. I wanted the earth to open up and swallow me, but instead, I had to walk to my car, a 20-year-old woman carrying that rejection box, unlock the door with my hand shaking so much that it took me 3, I tried, entered, closed the door, and only then burst into tears that I didn't even know I had saved. A violent cry that shook my entire body, that made me release sounds like a wounded animal, that lasted so long that when it finally stopped, my throat was raw and my eyes were so swollen that I could barely see. I looked at the clock on the dashboard. It was 7:35 in the morning. It had only been 35 minutes since I left my house, 35 minutes that completely destroyed the reality I knew. I drove back to my house on automatic, not remembering to turn any corners but getting there anyway. I parked crookedly in the garage and went in through the kitchen door that I had left open. And the house was exactly as I left it. The dirty bowl of cake batter in the sink, the smell of chocolate still in the air, the kitchen light on, everything normal except that I was no longer the same person who had left there an hour ago. I sat on the kitchen chair holding that paper with the cruel words and started rereading each sentence, each word chosen to hurt, and each time I read, it was like receiving a new stab. You are a weight we have carried out of pity for too long. That phrase especially cut deep because it implied that they had all discussed me, that they had reached a consensus about the burden I represented, that they had conversations behind my back where they decided to tolerate me just out of pity, and that pity had come to an end. You are old, alone, and have nothing left to offer. This other sentence forced me to face the stark reality of my existence at the age of 67. I had been a widow for 12 years since my husband Thomas died of a massive heart attack at the age of 63 while watching television on a Thursday night in June of 2013. He simply left without warning, without goodbye, without the chance for me to say that I loved him once again. I was retired, earning 3,200 rays a month after 42 years. Working as a nursing assistant in a hospital public, I lived alone in a 2-bedroom house that Thomas and I bought in 1998. Paying an installment of 500 reais for 15 years, I didn't have children because after 8 years of trying, the doctors said that I had fertility problems that made it impossible to get pregnant. So that whole family, my brother and his children, were all I had by blood in this world. And now they were telling me that I had nothing left, that I was nothing. Leave this here and go away. Don't come back. No one will miss you. Those final words were the death knell of the relationship. The official decree that I was banished, excluded, erased. I continued sitting in that chair reading and rereading until I had no more tears to cry, until my body was so exhausted that I could no longer feel anything but a huge, black void that took up all space inside me. I looked at the box with all the gifts that had been returned as if they were trash, gifts that I bought hoping for money at the end of the month, that I chose so carefully thinking about what each person would like, that I wrapped with pretty paper and ribbon, that I delivered with a smile and the hope of making someone happy. The silver necklace that cost 420 reais that I paid in 6 installments on the card, the gold earrings that cost 680 reais that I took from savings, the leather wallet that cost 350 reais that I bought with my 13th salary. Everything there thrown in a box as if it were worthless. I picked up the torn photographs and tried to put the halves back together, but it was impossible. They had torn right in the middle of each one, literally separating me from the rest of the family in the images. There was a photo from Christmas 2016 where I was in the middle of them all laughing, holding a roast turkey in my hands. Now it was just half a turkey and half my arm, the rest was gone. There was another photo from Clara's 15th birthday in 2012, where I was hugging her and blowing out the candles together. Now it was just her smiling face and half a candle. I had been blown out of that moment. I gathered up all the torn pieces and put it back in the box, closed the lid, and put it under the sink because I couldn't look at it. The kitchen clock said 9 in the morning, and I realized that it was still Friday, that the whole day was still ahead of me, that I had to somehow continue existing for the next 12 or 13 hours until I could sleep and maybe wake up and discover that it had all been a nightmare. But it wasn't a nightmare. It was as real as the physical pain in my chest that felt like an elephant sitting on top of my ribs. It was as real as my throat closed up that barely let me breathe. It was as real as my hands shaking non-stop. I tried to drink water, but threw it all up in the sink, my stomach rejecting anything. I went to the bathroom and looked in the mirror for the first time that day, and what I saw scared me. An old woman I didn't recognize. Red eyes sunk in dark sockets, mouth trembling, disheveled white hair, pale skin with red spots, a broken person looking back at me. This is the old parasite they see, I thought. This pathetic broken woman who has nothing left to offer. I washed my face with cold water, but it didn't do anything. The image remained the same. I went back to the kitchen and saw my cell phone on the table. I picked it up thinking that maybe there was a message from someone apologizing or explaining, but the screen was blank. No messages, no missed calls, nothing. I opened the family group on the messaging app. That group called Familia Santos, with a photo of all of us together taken 3 years ago, and saw that I had been removed. When I tried to send a message, a notice appeared saying that I was no longer part of the group. Removed, deleted, digitally banned too. I went to look at the individual contacts, opened the chat with Clara and typed, "Why did you do that? Why was it so cruel?" I sent it and looked at the screen waiting for the 2 little blue lines to appear showing that she read it. But after 5 minutes, nothing. After 10 minutes, nothing. After 20 minutes, I realized that she had blocked me because the messages were not being delivered. I tried calling, but it went straight to voicemail after 1 ring. Blocked. I tried my brother Marcos. I typed, "Marcos, I need to talk to you. I need to understand what is happening. Please answer me." Same thing. Message not delivered. Connection blocked. I tried Patricia. I tried Rafael. Everyone had blocked me on all applications and on the phone. I was officially cut off from all communication with them. The loneliness that invaded me at that moment was so profound that I felt as if I had fallen into a bottomless pit, falling and falling in the dark with nothing to hold me back, with no one to hear me scream. That day dragged on like broken glass on my skin, each hour taking forever. I tried to eat something at noon, but I couldn't. I tried to watch television, but I couldn't process what I was seeing. I tried to read, but the words were jumbled on the page. So I just sat on the sofa in the living room and stared at the wall for hours and hours, my mind replaying every moment of my life with that family, trying to find the exact point where everything had gone wrong, where I had become the unbearable weight that they needed to remove. I spent the next 3 weeks in a state that I can only describe as living death. I woke up every day at 5 in the morning after sleeping badly all night, having nightmares where I was being thrown out of places, where doors were slamming in my face, where voices were shouting words, things that I couldn't understand, but that hurt me anyway. I couldn't eat anything solid. I just drank tea and ate pieces of bread that I forced down so I wouldn't literally starve to death. And yet I lost 7 kilos in 20 days. My clothes became baggy, and I looked like a rack of bones when I looked in the mirror, which I avoided doing because I couldn't bear to see what I had become. My hair started falling out in a frightening amount. I found entire strands on my pillow in the morning, on the bathroom floor after a shower, in the blocked drain that I had to clean every day. My hands were shaking so much that I was dropping glasses and plates. I've already broken 4 cups and 2 plates in those weeks because I simply couldn't hold them properly. I had 3 panic attacks where my heart was racing at 200 beats per minute, where I couldn't breathe properly, where I was in a cold sweat and thought I was having a heart attack, where I was so scared of dying alone there in that house that no one would find me for days or weeks. My blood pressure, which was controlled at 120/80, rose to 160/100, and I had to go to the health center for a doctor to adjust the medication. And the doctor who attended to me, Dr. Camilla, 36 years old, asked if anything had happened because the change was significant, but I couldn't tell her. I just said that I was going through a difficult time, and she accepted without insisting. I tried to continue living normally. I woke up and took a shower and changed my clothes as if I had somewhere to go, but there wasn't. I just stayed inside because I couldn't bear the idea of going out and meeting someone I knew who would ask how I was, and I would have to lie and say that I was fine when I was completely broken. I stopped going to the church I had been attending for 15 years because there I would always meet family members or people who knew them, and I didn't want to have to explain why I wasn't going to family lunches anymore, why I wasn't showing up at events anymore. I canceled the only social commitment I had, which was an embroidery group that met every Thursday at Donna Irene's house for 8 years. I sent an apology message saying I wasn't feeling well and that I wouldn't be able to go anymore. Donna Irene, 72 years old, called worried, but I didn't answer. I let it go to voicemail. I didn't have the courage to talk to anyone. My contact with the outside world was limited to the guy from the market who delivered purchases to my home, and even then, I left the money at the gate and asked him to leave the bags there. I didn't even open the door to receive it. The bills kept arriving and I kept paying automatically. Electricity, water, telephone, internet, banking. But it was all mechanical. I didn't feel anything doing it. I was just a shell of a person carrying out basic survival movements. At night, I would lie in the dark bed looking at the ceiling for hours before I could sleep. And in those moments, my mind would go back to all the moments I spent with that family, especially with Clara. And it was a masochistic torture that I couldn't stop. I remembered when my sister Teresa died in a motorcycle accident when Clara was just 5 years old in April 2002. Teresa was returning from work at 7 in the evening when a truck ran a red light and hit her sideways. She died instantly without suffering, thank God. But it left that little girl in a state of shock for months. Clara's father, Roberto, was an irresponsible drunk who disappeared 2 months after the accident because he couldn't handle the pressure of taking care of a child alone. He simply took a backpack and left, leaving Clara behind. And it was Tomas and I who took her in, who took care of her as if she were our daughter, who registered her as a dependent so she could have the right to health insurance and everything else. Clara lived in my house for a full 10 years, from the age of 5 to 15, occupying the guest room that we turned into her room. We painted it pink, which was her favorite color. We bought a new bunk bed that she wanted even without having another child in the house. We put up stickers of princesses that she chose. I woke up at 5 in the morning to make breakfast for her before school, a spread of butter and chocolate milk that she loved. I prepared her lunchbox every day with a cheese sandwich and boxed juice and cookies and fruit. I took her to school in the morning before going to work at the hospital and picked her up in the late afternoon. I helped her with her homework every night, even though I arrived dead tired after a 12-hour shift at the hospital. Thomas taught her math at the kitchen table with infinite patience, even when she cried, saying she couldn't understand, and he made silly jokes until she laughed again. We paid Mater her school uniform every year, a new uniform every start of the school year, a backpack when the old one was damaged, sneakers that she asked for even though they were expensive because her classmates had the same, and she wanted to have them too, so she wouldn't feel different. We paid for dentist appointments when she needed braces when she was 13. 3,800 Rs that we took from the emergency fund because the plan didn't cover orthodontics, and she wore braces for 3 years until she was 16. We bought her a birthday present every year, parties we threw at home, or took her and her friends out for pizza. Once we took 6 12-year-old girls to a pizzeria and spent 300 Rs, which at the time was a lot of money for us, but it was worth it to see her happy. When she became a teenager and began the rebellious phase where she fought with me and said that I wasn't her mother, that she didn't have to obey, that she wanted to go live with her father who no one knew where she was, I swallowed all those harsh words and continued taking care of her. I continued making food that she liked, washing her clothes, cleaning her messy room, waiting up until she came back from parties at 15 and 16 to make sure she had arrived safely, even when she came home drunk at 3 in the morning and threw up in the bathroom and I had to clean it up, take care of her. When she decided at 15 that she wanted to go live with my brother Marcos because she said she would have more freedom there, I let her go, even with my heart broken because I thought it was better for her, that I was being selfish by wanting to arrest her, and Marcos had agreed to take her into his house, which was bigger, and he had a better financial situation working as a construction material store manager, earning 6,000 reais a month, while Tomas and I earned 3,200 and 2,800 respectively. But I continued to be present in her life. I continued to give her money when she asked for it. 500 reais here, 1,000 reais there for an English course, for new clothes, for a broken cell phone, and every time she asked for it, I gave it because I couldn't deny her anything, because she was the closest thing to a daughter I would have in this life. I paid for part of her college tuition. She studied administration at a private institution that cost 1,200 reais per month for 4 years from 2015 to 2019. I paid half of that during the 4 years, 28,800 reais in total, that I took from the savings that Tomas and I had saved for our old age. When she graduated in 2019, I gave her that silver necklace that later came back in the box, and I had a graduation party at my house for 20 people. I bought food, drinks, cake decorations. I spent 2,500 reais on that party, and I remember Clara hugging me that day saying, "Godmother, thank you so much for everything. I love you so much," and I cried with happiness, thinking that all the sacrifice had been worth it. But while I was in that living death state replaying all these memories, I began to notice other details that I had previously ignored or justified. Small signs that, when added together, showed that this rupture was not sudden, but had been built up over months or maybe years without me realizing it. I began to remember that in the last 18 months before that horrible November morning, things had already changed in subtle ways. Clara's calls, which were almost daily, became more spaced out. At first, she called every other day, then twice a week, then once a week, then once every 2 weeks, and in the last few weeks before the incident she never called. It was always me who called, and she answered with that voice of someone who is busy, with that rush to end the conversation straight away, responding with monosyllables, "Yes, no, okay, I have to go by." When I asked if everything was okay, she said she was just too busy with work. She had gotten a job at a digital marketing company, earning 4,000 reais a month, and said she was always working overtime. And I believed her and didn't insist, because I didn't want to be boring. I didn't want to be that clingy old aunt who doesn't let her niece live her life. The visits also decreased drastically. Before, she came to visit me at least twice a month. She would come over on a Saturday afternoon to have coffee and talk. She would stay for 2 or 3 hours. But in the last few months before November, she didn't show up once. She always had an excuse. She was traveling for work. She was sick. She had a lot of work to do. She was tired. She had a headache. She had commitments with friends. There was always something that was stopping her. I offered to go to her house, but she always refused, saying that the house was messy, that she was renovating, that it wasn't a good time. Then we'd make an appointment, and that time would never arrive. At Christmas 2024, almost a year ago, there was lunch at Marcos's house, and I took French toast that I made, and Chester that I baked. I got there at 11 in the morning as agreed, and I noticed that there were already people there from early on, dirty glasses in the sink proving that they had had breakfast together without calling me. And when I asked, Marcos said it was a last-minute thing. People showed up by surprise, but I saw from the looks exchanged that it was a lie, that it had been agreed, and I wasn't invited on purpose. During that lunch, I was in the corner of the table, literally at the far end of everyone, and no one really started a conversation with me. When I tried to say something, people responded with obvious disinterest and then changed the subject among themselves, as if I wasn't there. Clara was sitting at the other end of the table on my opposite side and barely looked at me throughout lunch. When our eyes met once, she quickly looked away, as if she had seen something unpleasant. After lunch, there was an exchange of gifts, and I gave each one the gifts I had bought and wrapped. I spent 600 reais in total on gifts for 6 people. But when it was my turn to receive, there was only a box of chocolates worth 50 reais that someone bought at the last minute at a gas station. I didn't even have a card or the name of the giver. They simply put them in front of me, and I thanked them, pretending I hadn't noticed the discrepancy. I thanked them smiling, even though I wanted to cry. And I left at 3 in the afternoon, saying that I was tired, when in fact I couldn't stand being in that hostile environment any longer. On Marcos's birthday in March 2025, he had a barbecue at his house and informed me just 2 days before via a short text message. "Auntie, on the 22nd, there's a barbecue here at noon," as if I were obliged to show up but without any affection in the invitation. I took picana that I bought at the butcher's, 2.5 kilos that cost 190 rees, and when I arrived, there were about 30 people there, many people I didn't even know, and again I was isolated, sitting alone on a plastic chair in the corner of the yard, watching everyone talking excitedly in groups that I wasn't part of. I tried to approach a group where Patricia was talking to some women, and when I got close, the conversation immediately stopped, awkward silence. And then Patricia said, "Oh, Elena, bring more ice from the kitchen, please," treating me like a maid. And I went to get the ice because I didn't know what else to do. And when I came back, the group had dispersed to another corner. I stayed at that barbecue until 4 in the afternoon, and even Marcos didn't come to talk to me properly. He just shouted from afar, "Thank you for coming, Auntie," and didn't even get up to walk me to the gate when I left. On Raphael's birthday in July 2025, he celebrated in a restaurant and told me the day before, "Auntie, we are going to have dinner at the Solar do Centro restaurant tomorrow at 8 o'clock at night. Cost per person 120 reis. Bring cash." Bringing money, as if I were just another guest who had to split the bill and not his aunt who always gave him expensive gifts on his birthdays. I went anyway. I arrived at the restaurant at 8 sharp. The table was already full with 12 people, and the only empty seat was at the end away from everyone again. I sat there, and during the entire dinner, the conversations went over my head. People literally talked to each other as if I didn't exist. They made inside jokes that I didn't understand and didn't bother to explain. They laughed at things that I didn't know what they were about. When the bill arrived, Raphael divided it among everyone and gave 120 reais per head as he had warned. I paid my 120 reais, but also gave a gift that I had brought, a branded polo shirt that cost 240 reais, and he opened it immediately and said just cool thanks and put it aside without any further enthusiasm. In addition to these official occasions, other smaller things had happened that seemed nothing in isolation, but together formed a clear pattern of progressive exclusion. In April, there was a cousin's birthday that I didn't even know about. I only found out later when I saw photos on the social media app, and everyone in the family was there except me. Clearly, I wasn't invited. In June, there was a baby shower for Patricia, who was pregnant again at the age of 56, to everyone's surprise. And I wasn't invited either. I found out by chance when I met a distant aunt in the supermarket who commented that the shower had been beautiful, and when I said that I didn't know it had happened, she was embarrassed and changed the subject. In August, Raphael moved into a new apartment and had a housewarming party. I saw photos later with 30 people there. I wasn't invited. In September, Marcos won the award for Best Salesperson at the store where he worked, and the whole family went to dinner to celebrate. I wasn't invited. It was as if they had created a parallel version of the family that I was no longer part of, a family that got together and celebrated and lived without me, and I only saw the echoes of those meetings later through photos and loose comments. In addition to social exclusion, there was also a change in the tone of interactions when they took place, especially in the last 6 months. The few times I talked to Clara, she was acidic. When I called and asked her how work was going, she would reply, "Okay, Auntie, I don't have much time now." When I offered help with anything, she would reply, "No need, no Auntie. I've already decided." When I suggested we see each other, she said, "I'll see. My schedule is full." When I sent her a message with some news or photo, she left it unchecked and didn't respond, or just responded with a thumbs-up emoji without any words. With Marcos, it was similar. He became distant and formal. He treated me with that cold politeness that is worse than rudeness, because at least rudeness is honest. When I called him, I felt like I was bothering him. He answered with that tone of "what's wrong?" And when I tried to talk about anything, he gave short answers and said he needed to go. The calls didn't last more than 3 minutes. I never really had a close relationship with Patricia. She was always a bit cold towards me since she married Marcos 34 years ago. But in recent times, she has become quite rude. Once I went to their house to take some clothes that I no longer wore, thinking she might want them, and she took the bag and said without even looking properly, "Oh, I'll see later," and she never brought it up again. She never said thank you, and weeks later, I saw a homeless woman wearing one of the blouses I had given her. Clearly, Patricia had thrown everything away or donated without even looking. Raphael, then, he has always been a bit arrogant since he was a teenager, but in recent times, he has started to treat me with barely concealed contempt. Once I offered to lend him money, as he had commented that he was financially tight, and he replied, "I don't need a pensioner's alms. No, aunt, I'm fine." with that arrogance that made me feel humiliated. Another time, I suggested that he go home for lunch and he said, "No way, my schedule is hectic," as if he were the president of a multinational when in fact he worked as a salesman earning 3,000 Rs. But the worst part, the one that hurt the most when I finally realized, were the conversations that stopped when I arrived. This has happened countless times over the past few months. I would arrive at Marcos's house for a visit and they would be in the kitchen talking. When I walked in, they would immediately stop talking and remain in an awkward silence, or change the subject to something generic like the weather or traffic. Once I arrived, and they were in the living room laughing loudly about something, when they saw me at the door through the screen, the laughter stopped instantly, and they became serious. And when I asked what they were laughing about, Marcos said, "Oh, nothing, nonsense." But from their looks I knew it wasn't nonsense, that it had been about me, that I had been the subject of their laughter. Another time, I caught Clara and Rafael talking quietly on the porch of Marcos's house during a Sunday lunch. They were leaning forward, whispering. When I approached, they quickly moved away from each other and pretended to be looking at plants. But I saw in their faces that I had interrupted something that I wasn't supposed to hear. These things all added up. The increasingly rare invitations, the exclusions from events, the interrupted conversations, the icy tones, the short answers, the refused visits, the hurried calls. All of this now showed me with painful clarity that I had been gradually being removed from the family for a long time. And that November morning, with the rejected chocolate cake and Clara's cruel words, was just the official formalization of something that had already been happening silently for over a year. They had decided to discard me, but they did it little by little, maybe to not seem too cruel, maybe to get me used to the idea, maybe simply because they didn't have the courage to do it all at once until they finally did. And what destroyed me was knowing that all this time they were pushing me away. I was trying harder and harder to please, to be less inconvenient, to not complain about the loneliness, to accept the crumbs of attention they gave me. I was becoming smaller and smaller, trying to fit into the increasingly narrower space they left for me, until that space completely disappeared, and there was no place left for my existence. On the 23rd day after that damn Friday, it was a Monday in December, the 9th to be exact, I woke up at 5 in the morning as always and lay looking at the ceiling as I had done every previous morning. But something was different inside me, something small but present that I couldn't quite identify. I got out of bed and went to the bathroom. I looked in the mirror, and I still saw the same destroyed woman as always. But there was something different in my eyes, a small spark that hadn't been there in the previous days, something that wasn't hope, because hope had completely died, but it was something else. Something harder and colder. Anger. It was anger starting to pierce through the layers of pain and depression, anger starting to burn slowly in the pit of my stomach. I went back to the room and lay down again, and for the first time in 23 days, I started to think differently. I started to think not just about what they had done to me, but why they had done it, and especially about what I had that they wanted. Because people don't cut off relationships with someone who has nothing. People cut off when there is something at stake, something they want, or something they don't want to share. I got up again and went to the small office that was actually just a corner of the guest room with a desk, opened the bottom drawer where I kept all my important documents, and began to review everything carefully for the first time in years. I had the deed to my house, registered in my name, and that of Tomas in 1998, now only in my name since he died. A house currently valued at around 400,000 Rs, according to research I did on the internet on real estate websites in the neighborhood. I had bank statements from my checking and savings account showing that I had 183,700 Rs saved over 42 years of work, every penny saved with sacrifice, every real that was left over at the end of the month going into savings, even when it meant not buying new clothes or not going out to eat. There was a life insurance policy that Tomas had taken out in 1995 that paid 200,000 Rs when he died, and he died in 2013, but the money was deposited in a joint account that I had with him. But I now discovered, looking at old statements, that half of that amount, 100,000 Rs, had been transferred to Marcos's account 2 months after Tomas's death, and I didn't remember authorizing this transfer. In fact, I didn't even remember knowing that it had been done. It happened because I was so disoriented in the months following Tomas's death that I didn't pay attention to anything. I just cried and tried to survive. And Marcos had said that he would take care of the bureaucracy for me, that it was better to leave it to him, as he understood finances, and apparently he was careful about transferring half of the insurance to himself. I also had an old notebook where I wrote down all the loans I made to my family over the years, because I always had a habit of writing these things down, and when I started leafing through that notebook and adding up the amounts, I almost fell off my chair. There were 16 different loans over 20 years, some small for 2,000, 3,000 reais, others larger for 15,000, 20,000 reais, and in total, there were 267,000 reais that I had lent and never charged back, never even mentioned, because I thought that family doesn't charge family, that the money was helping people I loved, and that was what mattered. Marcos had borrowed 85,000 reais over the years in 5 different loans, the largest of 32,000 to renovate his house in 2017, the smallest of 8,000 to buy a used motorcycle in 2009. Clara had borrowed 63,000 reais over the years in 4 loans, the largest of 25,000 for a 0-car down payment in 2021, the smallest of 7,000 for an English course in 2016. Rafael had borrowed 54,000 reais in 3 loans, the largest of 28,000 to pay card debts in 2022, the smallest of 9,000 for a trip to Europe in 2019. Patricia had taken out 21,000 reais in 2 loans, one for 15,000 for dental treatment in 2013 and another for 6,000 to buy household appliances in 2020. And other smaller relatives had taken smaller amounts totaling 44,000. All these loans had been made with the promise of repayment. They had all been requested urgently with sad stories about needing it badly and not having anywhere to get it. And I had given them all believing that they would pay it back when they could. But none of them had returned a single cent. And when I mentioned it lightly, they would change the subject or say it was difficult, but they would soon pay it off. And I didn't insist because I didn't want to be annoying. I didn't want to be that greedy aunt who keeps collecting debt. But now looking at those numbers added together, 267,000 reais, plus the 100,000 from the insurance that Marcos took, plus 1,800 from Clara's college, that amounted to 395,800 reais that I had given to them over 20 years. Not to mention expensive gifts for birthdays and Christmas every year. Not to mention the food I brought every time I visited. Not to mention the small renovations I paid for at Marcos's house, like changing the tap, fixing the leak, painting the room, not counting the gasoline and tolls every time we traveled together, and I insisted on paying because I earned less and wanted to contribute. If I added it all up, it would easily exceed 500,000 reais that I invested in that family over the last 2 decades. And they called me a parasite. They called me heavy. They said I had nothing left to offer. The bitter irony of this situation hit me with full force, and I began to laugh, a humorless laugh, the laugh of a person who has just realized the cruel joke in their own lives. They called me a parasite when they were the ones who sucked away everything I had to give for 20 years. They called me a burden when I carried their financial weight on my back for free. They said I had nothing to offer when I had already offered hundreds of thousands of dollars that they never gave back, and now they probably thought they didn't need because I was disposable. It was at that moment, sitting in that old office chair, holding that notebook and looking at the pile of documents spread out on the table, that something inside me that had been broken since that November morning began to reorganize itself, not to go back to the way it was before because that was impossible, but to transform into something completely different. The pathetic woman who had spent 3 weeks crying and wanting to die began to retreat, and in her place began to emerge a woman I didn't know, a harder and colder and more calculating woman, a woman who had been pushed over the edge of destruction and had found on the other side not death, but a kind of bitter rebirth. If I'm going to suffer anyway, I thought, let it be by doing something, not just passively accepting being discarded like trash. If they're going to treat me like an enemy, then I better be a real enemy, not this whiny victim they expect me to be. I got up from the chair, took a shower for the first time in 3 days, dressed in jeans and a light blouse, tied my hair in a ponytail, looked in the mirror, and saw that I still looked terrible, but at least I looked like a living person. I took my bag and left the house for the first time in 23 days. I got into the car that had been parked in the garage since that Friday and drove to the city center. I stopped in front of a commercial building where I had seen a sign for a law firm. I parked and went up to the third floor where Advocacia Mendes y Silva was located. I rang the doorbell and a secretary of about 40 years old answered me, said that I needed to speak to a lawyer about an urgent family matter. She asked if I had an appointment. I said that, no, but it was really urgent. She looked doubtful, but called inside and spoke to someone, then said that Dr. Rodrigo could see me in 15 minutes if I wanted to wait. I sat on a chair at the reception and waited, leafing through magazines without reading anything, just trying to maintain the calm and determination I had felt at home. 14 minutes later, the secretary called me and took me to a room where there was a man of around 52 years old, gray hair, prescription glasses, gray suit, serious but not unfriendly appearance. He stood up and shook my hand, saying, "Good morning, ma'am. I'm Dr. Rodrigo Mendez. Please sit down," and pointed to the chair in front of his desk. I sat down and suddenly I didn't know where to start, because how do you summarize for a stranger 20 years of love and 10 years of living together and 3 weeks of total destruction? But I had to start somewhere, so I started from the day of the cake. I told the whole story, from the moment I rang the doorbell to Clara's cruel words to the box with returned gifts until it was blocked by everyone. Dr. Rodrigo let me speak without interrupting, writing down some things on a pad, and when I finished, he asked me some specific questions about the amounts involved, loan dates, witnesses, documents I had, and I answered everything. Then he explained that I had several legal possibilities, that loans made to the family were recoverable in court, even if there was no formal contract, if I had proof of the amounts transferred, that bank transfer of life insurance without my authorization was a crime, that using documents without authorization was forgery, that public humiliation like the one I suffered was subject to action for moral damages. He said that we could take collection actions against everyone who owed amounts, action compensation against Marcos for the transfer of insurance, action for moral damages against Clara and others for degrading treatment. I asked how long it would take. He said that processes normally took 1 to 3 years, but that we could request urgent measures such as blocking debtors' bank accounts to guarantee future payment. I asked how much it would cost. He said he worked with a percentage of the value recovered, around 20%. So if we recovered 300,000, he would keep 60,000. I did the math mentally. There would still be 240,000 left for me without counting moral damages that could add up to more. I asked if he thought we had a real chance of winning. He said that with the documents I mentioned and bank statements proving transfers, we had an excellent chance of recovering at least half of the amounts, perhaps more. I took a deep breath and said that I wanted to go ahead, that I wanted to do everything that was possible within the law. He smiled slightly and said he was going to prepare everything and file the first action in 10 days. He needed me to bring all the documents and extracts and notebook and anything else I had. I left that office 2 hours later with a completely different feeling than when I entered. I was still hurt and sad, but for the first time in 3 weeks, I felt like I wasn't just being made a passive victim. I was taking control of the situation. I was reacting, I was fighting, and that changed everything. The next few days were frantic with organization. I spent hours and hours separating documents, making copies of bank statements from the last 20 years, photographing notebook pages, searching my cell phone and computer for old message conversations where family members asked to borrow money or promised to return it, printing everything, organizing it into physical folders by person and by year. I discovered that I had a lot more proof than I imagined. I had messages from Clara from 5 years ago saying, "Auntie, I really need that money for the down payment on the car. I promise I'll pay it in a year." Messages from Marcos from 3 years ago saying, "Sis, save me with 20,000 that I'm tight. I'll pay it in 6 months without fail." Messages from Rafael asking for 15,000 not to protest his name. None had paid. None had mentioned the debts again after receiving. And now I had everything documented in a format that the lawyer said would be accepted in the process. In addition to financial documents, I also started looking for other people who could serve as witnesses or who could help me in other ways. I remembered Dona Conceição, a neighbor next door to Marcos's house, who is 74 years old and has always been kind to me. She had witnessed several of my visits over the years and had seen how the treatment had changed. I decided that I would talk to her. I remembered cousin Juvenal, son of an aunt who has since died, who lives in another city, but who was also mistreated by Marcos in a matter of his mother's inheritance years ago and always had a grudge. Perhaps he had useful information or was willing to testify about Marcos's character. I remembered Simone, Raphael's ex-wife who divorced him 2 years ago because of his betrayals. She and I always got along well, and she had left the family with a bitter taste. Perhaps she had information about things Raphael did or said. I remembered Sister Marta from the church prayer group, a 68-year-old woman who had always been very welcoming to me, who knew about my situation because I had told her about the family months ago when things were already difficult. Maybe she could be a character witness about me or offer support in another way. I started making discreet calls and visits to these people. I first went to Dona Conceição's house one Thursday afternoon, rang the doorbell, and she opened it with her usual friendly face, invited me in, made coffee, and when we sat in her living room, I told her everything that had happened. She was horrified. She said that she always thought there was something wrong with the way they treated me recently, that several times she saw me arriving at the house next door and being unwelcome, that once she heard loud voices through the wall that separates the houses and recognized Patricia's voice, saying something like, "She only appears when she wants something," but I hadn't understood at the time that it was about me. Dona Conceição said that she was willing to testify about everything she had seen if she needed to, that she thought what they had done to me was cowardly, and hugged me tightly, saying that anything I needed, just call. I called Cousin Juvenal, who answered, surprised because we hadn't spoken for over a year. I explained my situation briefly and asked if he knew anything about Marcos that could be useful. He remained quiet for a few seconds and then said that there was a lot, that Marcos had deceived his mother before she died, made her sign papers transferring her inheritance to him when she already had advanced Alzheimer's and didn't know what she was signing, which he had tried to sue at the time but didn't, have money for a lawyer and ended up leaving it alone, but he still kept all the documents, and if I wanted, he would share everything with me and was willing to take part in the action against Marcos because he still wanted justice. I called Simone, who was surprised to hear my voice. I explained everything quickly and asked if she had any information about Raphael that could help me. She laughed with that bitter laugh of someone who has been through a lot and said that she had an entire file on his scams, messages where he admitted to having taken money from several people and not paid, prints of conversations with lovers where he spent money he didn't have to impress, proof that he used the corporate credit card of the company where he worked for personal expenses and was almost fired for it, but Marcos paid the debt to save, everything she had saved as insurance in case he tried anything against her in the divorce, and that she was willing to give me everything because her ex-husband deserved to get screwed. I went to Sister Marta's house, who welcomed me with that usual affection. We sat on her porch, and I broke down crying, telling her everything. She let me cry holding my hand, and then said that she could testify that she had known me for 12 years, that she had always seen me as an honest and generous person, that she knew that I had sacrificed a lot for that family, and that if I needed a place to stay or any kind of practical help, just talk. I came home after those conversations feeling like I had assembled a small but solid team of people who were on my side, who believed in me, who were going to help me in this fight. And that was a comfort that I hadn't felt in a long time, since before that horrible November morning, in fact. I opened a new account in a different bank than the one I used. I transferred half of my savings to this new account, 90,000 reais, as a security measure in case Marcos or others tried something against my finances when they discovered the processes. I bought a new cell phone and transferred the chip to it, leaving my old cell phone as bait in case they tried to track me in any way. I was being paranoid, but I preferred to be safe. I also started recording conversations whenever I left the house using a small recorder that I bought at the electronics store for 120 reais, because my lawyer said that although unauthorized recordings could not be used as main evidence, they could serve as clues if I managed to catch someone saying something compromising. I set up a security camera on the front door of my house, the kind that records movement and sends notifications to my cell phone, because I didn't know how my family would react when they discovered the lawsuits, and I wanted to have proof of any attempt at intimidation or invasion. Those 2 weeks of preparation before the processes were filed were the most productive I've experienced in years. I woke up every day at 6 in the morning with purpose. I had concrete things to do, I had a plan, I had an objective, and that completely changed my mental state. I was still sad, but I was no longer destroyed. I was channeled. I was focused. I had that cold anger that drives action instead of paralyzing it. On December 18th, on a sunny Wednesday with a temperature of 26 degrees, Dr. Rodrigo called me at 10 in the morning and said that he had filed 5 different lawsuits that morning. One against Marcos, charging $85,000 in loans, plus $100,000 from the insurance, plus moral damages of $50,000, totaling $235,000 raise. One against Clara, charging $63,000 in loans, plus $28,800 from the college, plus moral damages of $100,000 for public humiliation, totaling $191,800 raise. One against Rafael, charging $54,000 in loans, plus moral damages of $30,000, totaling $84,000. One against Patricia, charging $21,000 in loans, plus moral damages of $20,000 totaling $41,000, and a smaller collective action against 3 other relatives charging $44,000 in total. In total, the shares totaled 595,800 reais, not counting interest and monetary correction, which would increase values by at least 15% throughout the process. He had requested an injunction to block bank accounts of the 4 main defendants based on the risk of asset dilapidation, arguing that they were people without significant assets and that if he didn't block them now, I wouldn't receive anything later. The judge had given a period of 48 hours to analyze the injunction request. I hung up that phone shaking, not from fear but from adrenaline, from nervous excitement, from anxiety, anticipation of what would happen when they received the notifications. 48 hours later, on Friday the 20th of December, the day before Christmas Eve, Dr. Rodrigo called again and said that the judge had granted a partial injunction, blocking 50% of the amounts in each defendant's bank account for a period of 90 days while the case was ongoing. That is, if Marcos had 10,000 in his account, he would block 5,000. If Clara had 15,000, he would block 7,500, and so on. The bailiff would notify each person personally with a copy of the action on Monday the 23rd. Then they would find out everything 3 days before Christmas. The irony of the timing was not lost on me. They were going to have a very different Christmas than they expected. I spent that weekend in a strange state of tense calm, knowing that on Monday the bomb would explode and everything would change, that there was no going back, that I had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. I didn't regret it for a second. In fact, I felt more alive than I had in months. I felt like someone who had finally stopped being a doormat and had stood up. I didn't leave the house the whole weekend. I stayed inside organizing the last things, reviewing documents again, mentally preparing myself for upcoming confrontations. Monday, the 23rd of December, dawned cloudy and cool. The temperature was 21 degrees. I woke up at 5 in the morning without being able to go back to sleep. I lay waiting and waiting until at 9:43 in the morning, I received a message from Dr. Rodrigo. Notifications delivered to the 4 principals. Ready. It was done. I imagined the scene of the bailiff arriving at Marcos's house, ringing the doorbell, handing over the official envelope, Marcos opening and reading those pages and pages describing exactly how much he owed and why. Seeing the total amount of 235,000 reais, seeing that his bank account was blocked, seeing that he had 15 days to present a defense. I imagined his face changing from surprise to shock to anger to panic. I imagined him calling Clara, who was also receiving notification at the same moment. The 2 of them discovering together that they had been sued by the stupid aunt who they thought they were going to dismiss without consequences. I imagined Clara opening an envelope and seeing a claim for 191,800 reais, seeing a detailed description of loans that she probably no longer remembered, seeing a request for moral damages due to humiliation with a copy of the cruel paper that she had written, transcribed in its entirety for the judge to read. I imagined the phone starting to ring between them, frantic calls trying to understand what was happening. Someone suggesting calling me so I could drop cases, trying to call me, and discovering that they had blocked me so they couldn't talk to me. At 10:22 in the morning, my cell phone rang, an unknown number. I answered with a racing heart. It was Patricia, screaming on the other end, screaming that I was crazy, that I couldn't do that I was going to pay dearly, that families don't sue families. She was screaming so much that I put the phone away from my ear and just waited for her to finish. When he stopped to breathe, I said in the calmest voice I could, "Patricia, you called me a parasite. You expelled me from the family. You gave me gifts back. You publicly humiliated me. Now you're going to pay for it. Literally. And I hung up. I blocked unknown number. 2 minutes later, it rings again. Another unknown number. It was Marcos now, his voice trembling with anger. Elena, you've gone crazy. 235,000 reais. You know I don't have that. This will destroy me financially. Do you want to see me in the gutter? I replied. Marcos, you borrowed 85,000 over 20 years and never returned a cent. You took 100,000 from Tomas's life insurance without asking me for authorization. This is all documented and proven. You turn around now. You treated me like dirt. Now you accept consequences. I hung up. I blocked it. Another 10 minutes, and it rings again. Simone's number now, Rafael's ex-wife. She's calling me to say that Rafael had called her in desperation, begging her to convince me to withdraw the case, that he was freaking out, that his account had been blocked, and he couldn't pay the car payment and credit card. Simone was laughing at his despair. She said she told him she was going to talk to me, but she was actually calling just to tell me how sweet revenge was. I laughed along with her and thanked her for her support. Another half hour later, Dr. Rodrigo called saying that he had received a call from Clara's lawyer, asking for a meeting for a settlement. He asked if I wanted to consider a settlement. I said no, that he wanted to see the process through to the end. He wanted a court ruling condemning them all. He didn't want a settlement where they paid half, and that was it. He said understood. He then replied to the lawyer that there was no possibility of an agreement at the moment. During the next 3 days until Christmas, my phone didn't stop. Unknown numbers were calling, and I blocked them. Messages on the voicemail from distant relatives asking me to talk to Marcos because it was Christmas. A message from Dona Irene from the embroidery group saying that she had heard gossip about lawsuits and wanting to know if it was true. Neighbors commenting that they had seen a bailiff at Marcos's house and were curious. I didn't answer anything to anyone. I just kept total silence. I let gossip run wild. I let my family squirm without being able to reach me. Christmas arrived, and I spent it alone at home for the first time in my life. I ate a small frozen turkey that I made just for me. I watched a movie on television. And it was strange, but it wasn't sad. It was actually liberating. It was the first time I didn't have to pretend to be happy at a tense family gathering where no one wanted me there. It was the first honest Christmas in years. January 2026 arrived, and with it began the ripple effects of lawsuits. First, Rafael, who was the most financially fragile of the four, began to fall apart. He worked as a salesman in a furniture store, earning 3,200 reais a month. He had a financed car payment of 1,100 reais, a rented apartment payment of 1,300. A credit card was always maxed out with a minimum payment of 700 reais. He only had 1,100 reais left for food and expenses. So when his account was blocked in half, losing access to 6,000 reais that he had saved, he panicked. He tried to pay for the car but didn't have the money. He tried to negotiate with the bank but couldn't. And at the end of January, the bank recalled the car for non-payment, a gray Fiat Kronos from 2023 that he loved and washed every Saturday. It was towed away while neighbors watched. Without a car, he started to depend on public transport, which in the city was bad. He spent 3 hours a day going to and from work. He arrived late several times. The quality of his work fell. In mid-February, he was fired because he hadn't reached targets for 2 months. Without a job and without money, he owed rent for 3 months. In May, he had to leave the 2-bedroom apartment measuring 80 square meters in a good neighborhood where he lived and went to live in a rented room measuring 20 square meters in a boarding house in a peripheral neighborhood, paying 500 reais. The girlfriend he had had for 7 months, Juliana, 30 years old, broke up with him when she discovered her real financial situation because he had always lied and said he earned well and had money saved. She couldn't accept poverty and left. He tried to get a new job, but the city is small and the news spread. Potential employers did research and discovered legal cases and didn't hire because they thought it was a sign of a character problem. He only managed to find work as an assistant at a car parts store, earning 1,700 reais, less than half of what he earned before, barely enough to pay pension and eat. 5 months after the start of the proceedings, Rafael was living alone in a miserable room, working underemployment, without a car, without a girlfriend, without money. And according to information I received from Simone, he was in a deep depression. He started drinking a lot. He gained 15 kilos from eating junk food and drinking beer. He tried to commit suicide in July by taking 2 packs of sleeping pills, but he was found in time by the boarding house landlord and taken to hospital. His stomach was pumped and he survived, but he had to undergo psychiatric treatment, which he couldn't afford. So he did it through the unified system of health at a clinic, waiting 2 hours for a 15-minute appointment, where the doctor only renewed a prescription for an antidepressant. Marcos had a less dramatic but equally destructive collapse. He earned well, 6,200 Rs as a manager. He had his own house, so he didn't pay rent, but he had other commitments. Patricia's 2 young daughters from her second marriage to support, one 8 years old and the other 11. Their private school cost $2,400 a month together. The family's health plan cost $1,800. Payment for 2 used cars, one in his name and the other in Patricia's name, totaled $2,000. House water, electricity, internet and telephone bills totaled $800. There was little left. When his account was blocked, losing access to 11,000 Rs that he had saved, and when he started having to pay a private lawyer who charged $8,000 as a deposit plus $1,500 per month, his budget exploded. She tried to take her daughters out of private school, but they made a scene crying that they didn't want to go to public school with poor people. Patricia fought, saying that her daughters deserved quality education. In the end, she kept school but cut everything else, cut health insurance and switched to the unified system, cut cable TV, cut good internet and cheap internet, cut out red meat and started eating chicken and eggs, cut out restaurants and leisure. Life became very tight. Employees of the store where he worked began to comment on the process, because one of them was the cousin of someone who knew his neighbor who had spread gossip. His reputation in the store was tarnished. The boss, who had confidence in him, began to doubt. Did he steal money from his sister? Did he steal from the company too? Pressure increased. In April, he was demoted from manager to ordinary salesman, losing 1,000 raise in salary and a private room. Complete humiliation. Patricia started demanding him every day. They argued loudly about money, about me having sued them. She blamed him, saying it was his idea to expel me from the family. He countered by saying that she agreed. The daughters heard the fights and started having problems at school, falling grades, bad behavior. In June, Patricia threatened for the first time to ask for a separation if the situation didn't improve. Marcos begged her to stay, promised to resolve it, but there was no way to resolve it because processes were ongoing and he was unable to pay what he owed. Clara suffered differently, more socially than financially initially. She earned 4,800 Rs a month at a marketing company, lived alone in a rented apartment measuring 600 square meters, paying 1,800, had her own car that had already been paid off, so she was financially able to support herself even with a partial account block. But the impact was on reputation. When the company where she worked found out about the lawsuit, and they found out because her coworker had a cousin who was a notary's clerk and saw her name on the petition, the news spread in the office within 2 days. Her boss, a conservative man in his 60s who valued family values, called her into a room and asked about the process. She tried to explain that I was a problematic aunt who was being vindictive, but he didn't buy the story. He said that someone who treats family so badly probably treats coworkers badly too. He started keeping an eye on her. Any mistake would turn into a scolding. Any delay would be noted. The environment became unbearable. Friends she had had for years began to move away. Some called asking if it was true that she had publicly humiliated her 67-year-old aunt and was later sued for it. She tried to minimize it but couldn't. Little by little, invitations to parties stopped. Messages in the group of friends decreased. She became socially isolated. A boyfriend she had had for a year, 32-year-old Pedro, who was the son of a traditional family in the city, broke up with her in March after his parents found out about the lawsuit and said they didn't want their son married to a woman with no family values. Clara tried to create fake profiles on social media to tell her version of the story, but cousin Juvenal found out and created a profile to tell the real version with documents. It became a war on the networks. In the end, she deactivated everything because it was so stressful. She started to have insomnia. She took sleeping pills that left her groggy in the morning. She arrived at work with dark circles under her eyes. Her work performance dropped. In August, she was officially fired for poor performance, but everyone knew it was because of the lawsuits. Without a job, she tried to find another one. But in a small town where everyone knows everyone, it was impossible. Every interview she did, they searched her name and discovered processes and didn't hire her. She spent 4 months unemployed, surviving on savings that were dwindling quickly. She had to leave her legal apartment and went back to live with Marcos, the same house they kicked me out of, but now returning defeated. Father and daughter living together under the same roof that was heavy with late bills and constant fights. 2 weights on a boat that was already sinking. Patricia was not sued for a high amount, just $41,000, but she still suffered because she was married to Marcos under a partial community property regime, so the couple's assets could be seized to pay his debt, and she lived in fear of losing her house. He started working as a manicurist, doing nails at home to earn extra money, 700, 800 reais a month, which helped but didn't solve the problem. She also gained that aged expression that appears in women under chronic stress. Deep wrinkles around the eyes, mouth always pursed with worry, gray hair that she couldn't afford to dye, so she let it grow naturally. Her daughters suffered from a harsh environment at home. They started undergoing psychological therapy at the clinic, which was free but with poor service from an inexperienced intern once a month. Everyone in the family was falling apart, and I watched from afar, through information I received from Dona Conceição and others. And I'm not going to lie and say that I didn't feel satisfaction, because I did. I felt that bitter satisfaction of seeing unfair people being punished, of seeing cruelty having consequences, of seeing people who trampled on me now being trampled on by life. It wasn't happiness, because I would never go back to being happy as I was before, but it was something similar to justice. It was feeling like the universe had restored some kind of balance. During this time, I was also changing and rebuilding, but in a completely opposite way to their destruction. With processes underway, I had sold my house in April for 400,000 reais in cash to a young family that was looking for in the neighborhood. I used 330,000 to buy a smaller but cozy apartment of 72 square meters with 2 bedrooms, living room, kitchen and balcony in a modern building in a safe neighborhood. I spent 40,000 on renovation and decoration, hiring a painter, electrician, carpenter. I chose light colors, beige, white, light blue, that made everything bright. I bought new, simple but beautiful furniture, plants for the balcony, light curtains, everything designed to create an atmosphere of peace I needed. There was 30,000 left that I left in my new savings account as an emergency reserve. The apartment was ready in June, and I moved in on a sunny Monday. Ms. Marta and Ms. Conceição helped me with the move. We had lunch together on the first day in the new apartment, eating pizza that I ordered for delivery, sitting on the floor because the furniture hadn't all arrived yet, laughing at silly things, and it was one of the lightest moments I've had in months. Little by little, I started rebuilding the social life I had abandoned. I returned to the embroidery group in July after Ms. Irene called me insisting. I went on a Thursday with a bit of a doubt, but everyone welcomed me with affection. They wanted to know everything that happened. I told them the short version, and everyone was on my side. They said that a family that does this doesn't deserve loyalty. I met a new lady in this group, Ms. Beatrice, 73 years old, who had just moved to the city and was looking for friends. She was also a widow. Her husband had died 3 years earlier from cancer. She had 2 children, but they lived far away in other states, so she was alone. We identified each other immediately, similar souls who had experienced loss and loneliness. We started meeting for coffee once a week, every Tuesday at 3 in the afternoon, in a small cafe in the center. We talked for hours about everything and nothing, about films we watched, about books we read, about the past and the present, but never much about the future, because an old woman's future is always uncertain. The other day, Dona Beatriz suggested that we sign up for a seniors group that made monthly trips to nearby cities, cheap but well-organized tourism. I accepted, because why not? I filled out the registration form and we paid 200 reais in annual fees. First trip was in August to Gramado in Rio Grande do Sul. Bus with 32 elderly people, 2 days and 1 night, simple but clean hotel. We visited a chocolate factory, Lago Negro, covered street, Mini Mundo. It was fun in a light way that I didn't expect. Silly laughs on the bus, singing old songs, people getting to know each other and telling life stories. I returned home tired but happy. Second trip in September was to Campos do Jordão in São Paulo, cold climate that I love, hot chocolate and fondue, cable car with a beautiful view. I bought 3 woolen blouses and a scarf, took 50 photos, made 3 more friends in the group: Joanna aged 68, Silvana aged 71, Regina aged 65. Third trip in October was to Petropolis in Rio de Janeiro. I visited the Imperial Museum that I always wanted to visit. I walked through beautiful gardens. I had afternoon tea in a historic house. It was charming. During these trips, I realized that I had developed a new passion, which was photography. I started taking photos of everything with my cell phone: landscapes, buildings, flowers, people. When I returned home, I edited photos using an application that I downloaded. They looked beautiful. I posted them on a social network that I created, especially for this. I gained 100 followers in 2 months. Unknown people who liked my photos and commented. A small satisfaction of being seen and appreciated for something I created. At home, I took up my old hobby of crochet. I had learned it from my mother when I was 15, but I hadn't done it in decades. I bought colored threads and needles at a craft store. I spent 120 reais. I started making simple things: napkins, doilies, pot holders. It was good, so I ventured into making bigger things: shawls, blankets, blouses. A friend from the travel group saw a photo of a shawl I made and asked to buy one for her. I offered it for free, but she insisted on paying. I charged 80 reais, which was a fair price. I made it and delivered it. She was so happy that she showed it to other friends. 3 others ordered it. Suddenly, it had become a small business. I created a profile on a social network for sales. I posted photos of the pieces I made. The price varied from 50 reais for small things to 300 reais for large blankets. Andes, he sold an average of 5 pieces a month, an extra 1,500 reais that supplemented his retirement of 3,200. Then he started to earn 4,700 a month, enough to live comfortably, paying a condominium of 350, electricity of 170, water of 80, internet of 99, food of 800, medicine of 400. There was 2,500 left over, which he saved or used for trips and small pleasures. I had also resumed the health care that I had abandoned during the months of depression. I went back to the doctor regularly. I had a complete checkup in August. All tests came back normal, except cholesterol was a little high, so the doctor adjusted the medication. Blood pressure returned to 120/80 with medicine. Weight stabilized at 60 kilos for a height of 1 meter and 65 centimeters, which was healthy. I started walking 3 times a week early in the morning at 6 o'clock, 30 minutes around the block, breathing fresh air, watching the sun rise, greeting other neighbors who were also walking. A small ritual that organized the day. I also took care of my appearance again. A new, shorter, more modern haircut at a good hairdresser costing 150 reais. I bought new, more colorful clothes because I was sick of wearing only black and gray. I spent 600 reais on 3 pants, 3 blouses, 2 dresses. I learned how to do light makeup by watching tutorials on the internet. I bought lipstick and mascara, spending 200 reais. I looked in the mirror and saw a different woman from the broken one a year ago. I saw a woman who had undoubtedly aged, but who was truly alive, who had a sparkle in the eyes of someone who was living and not just surviving. I left the apartment more often. I went to the cinema alone to watch the films I wanted to see. I went to cafes to read books I wanted to read. I went to the market without rushing to choose products. I went to the park to sit at a pigeon feeding bank. The freedom to do everything at my own pace without having to satisfy anyone was liberating in a way I didn't imagine it would be. I also reconnected with the spirituality that I had abandoned. I went back to church on Sundays. Not the same one I went to before, because that one was attended by people who knew family, so there was too much gossip. I chose another smaller and more welcoming church in a different neighborhood. A new 40-year-old priest called Father Julio, who gave beautiful sermons about forgiveness and renewal that resonated with me. I signed up for a prayer group that met on Thursday nights. There were 10 women of varying ages between 50 and 80. We shared. We worried and prayed together. A supportive environment without judgment. A place where I could talk about pain without fear of being seen as weak or resentful. One thing I realized in this process of rebirth is that I was finally living for myself for the first time in my life. For 67 years, I had lived for others, for parents when I was young, for my husband after I got married, for my niece after she came into my life, for my brother and his family whenever they needed me, always putting their needs and desires before mine, always being a caring person, a giving person, a sacrificing person, never stopping to ask what I wanted, what I needed, what made me happy. Now, with no family to care for and no one making demands on me, I had space and time to discover who I was when I wasn't in the role of caregiver, and I was discovering that I was an interesting person who liked photography and crochet and travel and coffee and reading and walking, and who didn't need validation from an ungrateful family to be valuable. My self-esteem that had been completely destroyed that November morning was being rebuilt brick by brick, not based on external approval, but based on the self-respect that I was relearning to have. This didn't mean that the pain had disappeared or that I had completely overcome betrayal. I still had bad days where I woke up sad, remembering happy moments with Clara when she was little. I still had nights where I cried for the family I thought I had, but never actually had. I still had moments of intense anger when I thought about the cruel words and public humiliation. But the difference is that these moments no longer defined me. They were waves that came and went, but didn't drown me. I had learned to surf on top of them instead of being dragged down. And there were also lawsuits progressing that gave me a sense of purpose and justice. Each scheduled hearing was a small victory. Each document accepted as evidence was validation that I was right. Each time a lawyer from the other side tried to reach an agreement, and Dr. Rodrigo refused on my behalf, I felt satisfaction in knowing that I wasn't going to let it go cheaply, that they were going to pay every last penny that they owed, plus interest, plus correction, plus moral damages. In October, there was the first conciliation hearing in the case against Clara. It was in an old courthouse in the city center. A small room with a long table, a judge in her 50s, a clerk taking notes, Dr. Rodrigo on my side and Clara's lawyer on the other side. Clara sitting far away from me, avoiding looking in my direction. The judge tried to promote an agreement, asked if I would accept receiving a smaller amount in installments. Dr. Rodrigo said no. The judge insisted, saying that the process could take years and that an agreement was faster. I said that I would rather wait to have complete justice than accept half-quick justice. The judge sighed and scheduled a new hearing for January 2027. Clara tried to approach me as I left the forum. She caught my attention, saying, "Aunt Elena, please." But I passed straight by without stopping, without looking. Dr. Rodrigo guided me to his car, and we drove away. In the rearview mirror, I saw her standing on the sidewalk watching us leave with a look of despair. I didn't feel any pity. In November 2026, exactly 1 year after that horrible morning of the rejected cake, I was sitting on the balcony of my apartment drinking coffee and reading the newspaper when my cell phone rang. It was an unknown number, but this time I answered because it could be related to lawsuits. It was Marcos. His voice was completely different. He no longer had anger or arrogance. It was the voice of a defeated, tired, almost pleading man. He said, "Elena, I need to talk to you. Please don't hang up. I need 5 minutes." I remained silent, waiting for him to continue. He said that he was calling from a public payphone because he had no credit on his cell phone, that his situation was untenable, that he had lost half his salary, that his house was being threatened with seizure, that his daughters were suffering in a difficult environment, that Patricia was threatening to separate, that Clara was living with them unemployed and depressed, that Rafael had tried to kill himself. He said that he understood my anger, that they had done a terrible thing to me, that they were cruel and ungrateful, that if he could go back in time he would change everything, but that he couldn't go back, he could only try to fix it from now on. He said he was asking me for real forgiveness for the first time. Not self-serving forgiveness wanting me to drop the cases, but genuine forgiveness because he spent a whole year reflecting on what they did and understood the depth of the cruelty. He said that he really loved me, despite everything that happened, that I was his sister, and he had thrown that in the trash due to the influence of Patricia, who was always jealous of me, that he was weak and had let his wife manipulate him against me. He said he wasn't asking to drop cases because he knew he didn't deserve it, but he was just asking to talk face to face once, just 5 minutes, so he could look me in the eye and truly apologize. I listened to everything in silence, heart pounding, mixed emotions rising. Part of me that was his sister my whole life, wanting to accept apologies and hug and forgive. Another part of me that was a woman who had suffered a whole year because of him being tougher. When he finished speaking, he was silent for 10-15 seconds, and then I replied, "Marcos, I accept your apology. I believe you are sorry because you are suffering consequences, and you finally understand that actions have prices. But accepting apologies does not mean reconciliation. It doesn't mean going back to what was. What existed between us died the day you allowed your daughter to call me an old parasite and applauded when that happened. You can live your life, and I will live mine, but we will live separately. I will not withdraw cases. You will pay everything you owe. Not out of revenge, but out of justice. Because lending money and not paying it back is theft. Because forging an insurance transfer is a crime. Because publicly humiliating an elderly woman is cruelty that deserves compensation. When processes end and amounts are paid, then it's over for good. There will be nothing connecting us anymore. When I die, you don't need to be told. I don't want you at my funeral. When you die, I won't be there either. It's over, Marco. I accept apologies, but I do not accept returns. He was silent on the other side. I heard him sobbing softly. Then I heard the sound of coins falling and the line cutting off. Payphone credit had run out. I turned off my cell phone and placed it on the table, looked at my cup of coffee, which was getting cold, took another sip, and went back to reading the newspaper. Her chest felt tight, but she wasn't sorry for what she said. It had been a harsh but necessary truth. She had established clear limits. She had maintained her dignity. She had chosen self-respect over the false peace that would come from premature reconciliation. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or trusting again. Forgiveness just means releasing anger that poisons yourself. And I was working on that every day. I was slowly releasing anger, not for them, but for them. Me, so I wouldn't carry the weight of hate for the rest of my life. But that didn't mean they deserved a place in my life again. Donna Beatriz arrived half an hour later for our weekly coffee, sat on the balcony with me. I told her about Marcos's call. She listened, holding my hand, then said that I had done it right, that a family that hurts doesn't deserve an automatic second chance just because they are family. We stayed there talking about other things, about the trip that was planned for December, going to Curitiba to see the botanical garden and the wire opera, about the book she was reading by Nicholas Sparks, about the new recipe for carrot cake that she wanted to teach me, life moving forward, life happening despite and beyond the pain, and that was real healing. Not erasing the past, but building a present that was worth living. If you've been following this story so far, leave a like because you need to see what happens now. Comment which country you are watching from. And if you've ever felt discarded by those who should love you, know that this twist is for all of us. 2 years after that cake morning, December 2026, court cases finally ended with favorable sentences in all cases. Marcos was ordered to pay 185,000 reais, 85 of which were loans, 100 from the insurance, plus 30,000 of moral damages reduced by 50 by the judge who found the original value excessive. The total with interest and correction was 210,000 reais. Clara was ordered to pay 151,000 reais, 63 of which were 28,800 college loans, plus 60,000 of moral damages, reduced by 100, because the judge said that although the act was cruel, it did not justify such a high amount. The total with interest was 172,000. Rafael was ordered to pay 72,000 reais, 54 of which were loans, plus 20 of moral damages reduced by 30, a total of 84,000 with interest. Patricia was ordered to pay 35,000, 21 of which were loans, plus 15 moral damages reduced by 20, total with interest 40,000. Other relatives had smaller agreements totaling 50,000. The total I got was 556,000 reais. Dr. Rodrigo kept 20% of it, which was 111,200, leaving me 444,800 clean reais. Payments were made in different ways because none of them had all the money at once. Marcos had to sell the house where he lived for 370,000 and move with his family to a small rented apartment. He used part of the money from the sale to pay me 150,000 in cash, and the rest was paid in monthly installments of 3,000 for 20 months. He and Patricia had to take on extra work to make ends meet. She working as a hairdresser at home in addition to being a manicurist. He doing bricklaying jobs on the weekends in addition to his job. Clara had no assets to sell, so she had to pay everything in installments of 2,000 per month for 72 months, 6 years of paying every month. She got a new job in another city and had to move there to start over. She works as a store assistant, earning 2,500. so literally half of her salary goes to me every month. Rafael also paid in installments of 1,000 reais per month for 84 months. 7 years, he managed to return to work as a salesman in a small company far from the city where no one knows him. Patricia sold jewelry she had and paid half of it in cash, 15,000, and paid the rest in installments in 1,000 per month. Other relatives paid as they could. I deposited the 444,800 in a conservative investment that yields an average of 7% per year. That is 31,136 reais per year, or 2,594 per month, just in interest without touching the principal. Added to a pension of 3,200 plus crochet income of 1,500, I now have 7,294 reais per month, more than double what I had before, enough to live comfortably and still save for emergencies. I also bought a good private health plan that costs 1,200 a month because I'm getting older, and the single system is not reliable, so that leaves 6,000 a month, which is excellent. With the financial situation resolved, I was able to focus completely on rebuilding my emotional and social life, which was flourishing. Travel Group made 6 more trips during 2026. We went to Foz do Iguaçu to see waterfalls, to Florianopolis to see beaches, to Bonito to go floating, to Ouro Preto to see historic churches, to Tiradentes to ride the steamboat, to Fernando de Noronha, which was more expensive, but it was worth every penny to see those blue waters. On all these trips, I was accompanied by my friends, Dona Beatriz always, Joana Silvana Regina sometimes. I met more people too. I expanded my social circle to 25 people who I consider true friends, not superficial, but people who know my story and accept me as I am. The crochet business has grown. I now have 230 followers on social media, selling an average of 10 pieces per month, 2,000 reais in income. I also started giving crochet classes to beginners. I charge 50 reais per 2-hour class. I give 2 classes a week for groups of 4 people, plus 400 reais per month. So total crochet income is 2,400. I also resumed senior dance classes that I discovered in September. Every second and fourth Friday from 3 to 4 in the afternoon in a community hall, we pay 50 reais per month in monthly fees. We dance Foro Bolero Samba Waltz. The teacher is 60 years old and very lively. The class has 22 people between 60 and 85 years old. Everyone is laughing and having fun, excellent physical and social exercise. Photography became a serious hobby. I took a free online course in composition and lighting. I bought a used camera for 1,200 reais. The photographs improved a lot. I even won a small prize in a local senior photography competition. I won 300 reais and a certificate that I framed and put on the wall. Health is great. All the tests in December 2026 came out perfect. Cholesterol was normal. Blood pressure was stable. Weight was stable. The doctor said I was as healthy as a woman 10 years younger. I felt proud. Spiritual life also strong. Prayer group became an essential part of my week. There I can talk openly about the process of forgiveness that I am going through. Because forgiveness was not instantaneous. It was hard work for 2 years. It was a daily choice to let go of anger, not to harbor resentment, not to wish harm even when part of me still wanted it. Father Julio helped me a lot with conversations after Masses. He said that forgiving is not saying that what they did was right, but it is saying that you will no longer let that hold you back. It is freedom not for them, but for you. I followed that advice, worked on it every day, and slowly managed to get to a place where I think about them without feeling sharp pain, just wistful sadness for what could have been but wasn't, and even that is lessening with time. An important change that happened was in my perspective on love and family. I learned that biological family does not guarantee true love, that blood does not create automatic loyalty, that people can share DNA and still betray you and abandon you by hurting you. I also learned that a true family is the one you choose, people who show through actions, not words, that they care, who show up when you are down, who celebrate your victories, who mourn your losses, who treat you with respect and constant affection, not just when it is convenient. My friends Dona Beatriz, Joana, Silvana, Regina, Carmem, Dona Conceição, Dona Marta, these women are my real family now. They saw me through the worst moments and continued by my side. They celebrate my small achievements, like selling a crochet piece or winning a photography contest. They call just to see how I am. They show up unannounced with a cake saying they made it and brought it to share. They remember my birthday and surprise me. They are the family that I chose and that chose me back. This does not erase the pain of having lost blood family, but it puts it into perspective. It shows that the loss of people who did not value you opened space for the entry of people who do. In January 2027, during the group's trip to Parity, I met a man called Antonio, 72 years old, widowed for 4 years, a tall man measuring 1.78 meters, white hair, brown eyes, kind smile, retired and who was a history teacher for 40 years. We were on the same bus. He sat in the row behind mine. We started talking during the 6-hour trip. We talked about everything, about cities we knew, books we read, films we liked, his family and lack of family of mine, losses we suffered, new beginnings we made. Conversation flowed so naturally that we didn't even notice time passing. In Parati, we stayed in the same hotel. We had dinner together the first night at a seafood restaurant. He insisted on paying, and I didn't accept, so we split the bill. The second night we had dinner together again. This time he managed to pay in secret before I saw it. During walks around the historic city, we walked side by side. He offered his arm when we climbed the cobblestone slope, and I accepted. His light touch on my elbow made me feel something I hadn't felt in years, something similar to romantic interest, but still shy and uncertain. Last night of the trip, we sat on the hotel balcony, talking until midnight 30. Full moon illuminating the sea, cool breeze. He told us about his wife, how he died of Alzheimer's after 10 years of illness, how difficult it was to watch it slowly disappear, how he felt guilty about feeling relief when it finally went away, how it took him 3 years to accept that he could live again. I told my complete story, the family that rejected me, the lawsuits, the reconstruction I did. He listened, holding my hand on the small table between our chairs, a gentle, non-invasive grip. And when I finished, he said that he thought my strength was admirable, that many people would have given up, but I fought and won. When the trip ended, we exchanged phone numbers. He lives in the same city as me, just in a different neighborhood. We agreed to have lunch together the following week. Lunch became a weekly ritual, every Thursday at 12:30, a different restaurant every week. Italian, Japanese, Brazilian steakhouse. Conversations continued deeper and deeper, discovering affinities, similar humor, similar values. Third month of lunches, in March, he invited me to dinner at a more sophisticated restaurant. I noticed that it was different from lunches. He was nervous in a cute way, shirt ironed, perfume, good hair, neatly combed. During dinner, he said that he really liked me, that he hadn't felt that way about someone in years, that he wanted to know if I felt the same way. I was surprised because I wasn't expecting a statement. I thought about his and my feelings. I realized that, yes, that I liked him too, that I looked forward to our Thursdays, that I thought about him during the week, that I got ready with extra care on the days I would meet him. I said yes, I felt the same way. He smiled with relief and asked if I would accept dating him officially. The word dating sounded strange coming out of the mouth of a 72 man, but it also sounded sweet. I accepted. First kiss was in the restaurant parking lot after that dinner, a gentle chaste kiss with dry but warm lips that lasted 3 seconds and made my heart race like a teenager. Dating developed slowly as it should be at our age, no rush, just enjoying each other's company. He comes to my apartment twice a week to watch a movie, or just talk. I go to his house once a week for dinner, which he cooks surprisingly well. He makes risotto and roast chicken better than me. We don't live together, and we don't have any plans for that. We each have our own independent lives, and that's fine. We are non-dependent companions. Sex happened 4 months after we started dating. It was respectful, gentle, without unrealistic expectations. 2 old bodies meeting with tenderness, not burning passion, and it was beautiful just the way it was. His family, 2 children and 4 grandchildren, welcomed me when I met in July. We had a barbecue at his eldest son's house. Grandchildren called me Grandma Lena, which melted my heart. I felt welcomed that I hadn't felt in years. Antonio met my friends who approved of him, saying that he seemed like a really good man. Donna Beatriz even joked that she was jealous because our coffee Tuesdays no longer happened every week, since some days I had commitments with Antonio. Life was complete in a way I never imagined possible when I was at rock bottom in December 2024. Now in December 2027, 3 full years after the betrayal, I wake up in the morning next to Antonio, who sleeps at my house 2 nights a week. I make coffee for both of us. We sit on the balcony drinking and planning our day, maybe visiting an art exhibition or going to the cinema or simply walking in the park. Financially, I am more stable than I have ever been. Emotionally, I am healed as much as possible. Socially, I am surrounded by true love. Spiritually, I am at peace. Occasional news about the old family arrives through common acquaintances. Marcos continues to pay his installments religiously. His marriage to Patricia survived, but left a deep scar. Their daughters have grown up and apparently now understand what their parents did and are ashamed of it. Clara got married in August 2027 to a man she met in the new city where she lives. A simple wedding without a big party because she didn't have any money. I wasn't invited, obviously, and I wouldn't even go if I went. Rafael continues to pay too. He still lives alone. He had a girlfriend that didn't last. He continues in therapy. None of them have tried to contact me since Marcos's call 2 years ago. They respected my request to stay away, or maybe they just don't have the courage to face what they did. I don't miss them. Sometimes I miss the idea of them, the family I thought I had, but not the reality of who they were. Sometimes I think about Clara as a child, and I feel a pang of pain. But then I remember her as an adult, calling me an old parasite, and the pain turns into resigned sadness at a lost opportunity. I visited Tomas's grave last month. I took pink flowers that he liked. I sat on the stone bench next to the tomb and counted to him everything that happened in these 3 years. He would be proud of me for fighting, for defending myself, for rebuilding. He always said I was stronger than I thought I was, and I finally proved him right. I promised him that I would live well for the rest of my remaining years, that I wouldn't waste time with bitterness or loneliness, that I would enjoy each day as the gift that it is. When I left the cemetery that day, the sun was setting, painting the sky orange and pink. I stopped at the gate and looked back one last time. I whispered thank you and goodbye. I turned and walked away. Last week I was embroidering on the balcony when my cell phone rang. An unknown number, I answered. It was a young woman in her early 20s introducing herself as Julia, Patricia's eldest daughter with Marcos, the one who was 11 years old when it all started and is now 14. She said that she had gotten my number from a distant cousin, that she was calling secretly from her parents, that she needed to talk to me. My heart sank, but I let her speak. She said that she grew up hearing her parents' version of what happened, that I was a crazy aunt who had sued her family unfairly, but that she recently discovered the complete truth by reading documents from the case that she found saved, that she read everything and was shocked by what her parents and sister did, that she felt ashamed, that she wanted to apologize to me even though she hadn't directly participated. She said that her mother always spoke badly about me, but she now understood that it was jealousy and manipulation, that her father was weak and let himself be carried away. He said he wasn't asking for reconciliation or anything. He just wanted me to know that someone in the family recognized injustice and apologized. I remained silent, processing. Then I said that I was grateful for her call, that it took courage to do so, that I didn't hold a grudge against her because she was a child when everything happened and also a victim of the toxic environment, but that I wasn't going to resume a relationship with her family. She said she understood, thanked me for answering, wished me to be happy. We hung up. I thought about that call for days. It had been unexpected, but in a way it had brought additional closure, knowing that at least one family member understood and acknowledged error, even if too late to change something, was some kind of validation. I told Antonio about the connection, and he said that I should be proud because I had stood firm in my dignity, and now even members of the other party recognized that I was right. I now look in the mirror and see a 70-year-old woman who I turned in January of 2028. Completely white hair that I let grow and no longer dye. Wrinkles around her eyes that come from laughing, not from crying. A body that still moves well even though it sometimes hurts. Hands stained with age but firm when they hold a crochet needle or camera, or Antonio's hand. I see women who were betrayed and destroyed but didn't stay down, who got up and fought and won and rebuilt something better than they had before. I see a woman who learned the hardest lesson in life, which is that family is not those who share blood, but those who share respect. I see a woman who still breathes, and while she breathes, has the power to choose how to live. And I choose to live with dignity, with joy, with love, with purpose, not despite the pain, but through it, transforming wound into strength, transforming rejection into rebirth, transforming end into beginning. If this story touched you, leave your comment saying where you are watching it from and share it with someone who needs to know that it is possible to start over. Like if you believe that no woman deserves to be treated as disposable. And remember, as you breathe, you have the power to change your story. I changed mine. You can too.